You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to thewritingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to Friday night and the Writing Community Chat Show live. We've got a great guest for you and we can't wait to get into it. Hello everybody and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show live on a Friday night. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic show. We've got an absolutely amazing author on tonight with some great work and some fantastic writing advice. He's actually wrote a book about it, so I'm really excited to talk to him. And in order to do that, sometimes we go solo on the show and we interview our guests by ourselves, but sometimes when Agat's away, Huli will play and he invites a guest co-host on, and I've done that tonight because tonight's guest co-host is a huge fan of tonight's author, so we couldn't help but bring them both together in this very special interview here live on a Friday night. So ladies and gentlemen, here's my co-host, Matt Adcock.
Good evening, folks.
How's it going, Matt? You okay?
You're kind of breaking up a little, but all good.
All good. Yeah, no, thank you so much for obviously like your passion and enthusiasm for Gareth's work was second to none. And I thought, how can we not introduce Matt Adcock to Gareth Powell on YouTube tonight?
Thank you. I mean, it is an honor because I was like one of the world's biggest Ian M. Banks fans, and I probably still am. I met the guy before he died. He was instrumental in encouraging me to start writing and give me advice, which was great. And when I read the Embers of War trilogy by Gareth, it just blew me away. It was as if Ian Banks had come back from the dead and written a freaking kick-ass trilogy of books. I fell in love with the spaceships, the whole, narrative, the plot. It's got everything you could possibly want for a really hardcore sci-fi adventure, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So how he did it, I'd love to know. That's part of what I want to find out tonight.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely get into it. I mean, I will try my best to be an Agate replacement. I've cut my hair a little bit shorter and I've tried to look 10 years older. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Obviously, we've had you on the show before in your, your writing capacity, in your professional capacity as well. So we know you're a great guy, and you obviously do your own podcast as well. So you're well versed in interview.
Cheers. I mean, we have fun. It's a cyberpunk podcast, so unless you're particularly into that weird vein of sci-fi, it's probably not of interest to you at all. But we do veer off topic. We've covered everything from like Terminator through to, as well as the core texts such as Neuromancer and the like. Yeah,
there's loads of people in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm trying to navigate the two, but Brandon, you are here. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is my terrible efforts at multitasking. I'm not going to show some of the comments because they're slightly inappropriate, Brandon. Behave yourself. But no, Matt, should we get?
We really should. I can't wait.
Yeah, I feel like we're waffling too much, and I think we need to give Gareth the attention that he deserves. So tonight, 100%. Obviously, we've got the amazing Gareth Powell on. His list of awards that he's been nominated for is far too many for me to read out. I think it would take me most of the episode to read out all the awards that he's been nominated for. But he's an absolutely fantastic author. British author, obviously, as well. He's known for his fast-paced characters, his fast-paced writing, his character-driven science fiction, and he explores big ideas and themes of identity and loss and the human condition. I'll go into a little bit. He's twice won the coveted British Science Fiction Association Award for Best Novel. I mean, to win that twice is just absolutely astonishing. Most people dream of. Yeah, that's not just showing up, is it? That's absolutely schooling everybody and taking those awards away. So I think without further ado, we just get Gareth on and we have a chat to him. So, ladies and gentlemen, Gareth Powell.
Hi.
Good evening, Gareth.
Hello. I'm blushing.
Yeah. No, Gareth, it's an absolute pleasure to. No, I was going to say it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for speaking to us tonight. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you for the invite.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So I'm in Chris's hands because I'm his standby co-presenter tonight, so he can lead you through the format, and I'll just ask you some hopefully interesting questions.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And Gareth, you've been an absolute, like, loads of people have said to us whenever we've done over 240 shows now, and people have mentioned you multiple times. You've got to get Gareth on. You've got to get him on. And obviously, we saw a window of opportunity, and the fact that we've made it happen is fantastic. The first section of the show is called The Road to Writing, where we delve into how you got into writing in the first place. So I'm going to play a little video and then ask you some questions about how writing became a part of your life. So, Gareth, if you can, take us back to the moment when you first realized that you had a passion for writing stories.
I can't pinpoint an exact moment because it's something I've literally always done. I grew up when I was about 3-4 years old. I used to get plonked down in front of the TV to watch Star Trek. Old black and white TV. This was like the early 70s, and probably one of the first times it had been shown on UK TV, as far as I'm aware. But, and I loved that. And I had a little dinky model Enterprise, and I would take that. And, as soon as the show was over, I'd be off making up my own stories or kind of adapting what I'd already, what had happened on the show and thinking how more exciting it would be if X, Y, and Z happened and so on. So it's something I've always done. I can remember when I was in junior school, I wrote a story about a dragon's egg that rolled out of the nest and down onto the road, and a knight found it and it hatched. And I said, "Hi, will you be my friend? I will call you Spiky." And they went off and had adventures together. So yes, I was subverting genre norms even as an 8-year-old. So it's something I've literally always done. I had some spiral top reporters notebooks when I was about 10 years old, and I filled 3 of them with this massive rambling space saga that owed a lot to whatever had been on Blake 7 that night, or the episode of Battlestar Galactica I'd happened to watch that day. So there was no overall plot, just a load of rambling episodic adventures. But yeah, it's something that's always been part of who I am and what I do and what I want to do. But it wasn't till I was about 30 that I figured out I could maybe do it for a living. So yeah.
I think that's the right answer. If you've always had the love and passion for it to flow out, I think that comes across in your books. It's a real, you can tell, but you're invested. You're not just doing this for the paycheck, although I could be wrong. It's kind of like it's flowing out of you, and you feel that sense of excitement. It's transferable from the page, and not a lot of books do that. Not enough, I would say.
I have some attention issues, which means if it felt like work, I wouldn't be able to do it. So it has to feel like play, and it has to feel like fun. I know some authors and some painters as well, this applies as well, who once their hobby becomes their job, all the fun goes out of it. And so I've been very careful to keep it fun and to write what I want to write and to write it the way I want to write it. And, there are certain times I'm sitting at my keyboard, for instance, the chapter 49 of Fleet of Knives, which is 2 words long. And and then I cackled to myself and I thought, I can't possibly get away with this.
I'm so glad you did. I don't think Hoodie's read it, but like it is, if one of the words is F, right? So, it's great.
Yeah, but I thought, oh, what the hell, I'll give it a go. And I sent it off to my editor expecting her to go, no. And she just went, she just let it go. And so I thought, oh, brilliant. So I got away with that. So
now it's
Gareth, yeah, absolutely. Gareth, what I would say is, can you describe that moment where you've always been writing stories, but then you said it wasn't until you were 30 years old when you actually realized, hang on a minute, maybe I can do this for a living and I can do this as a regular thing. What was it about your attitude before you hit 30 that was different from after turning 30?
I think sometimes you have to put some miles on the clock before you can write about the journey. And I studied creative writing at university and wrote a lot of awful poetry and a few short stories, and they were pretty bad as well, very overblown and purple prose and dramatically gothic. And so kind of got that out of my system. And then basically for my 20s, I read just everything I could get my paws on. But I kind of never thought that I would have the attention span to do a novel. But as I was coming up to being 30, and it was actually the turn of the millennium that year as well. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, it's time to, whatever, will get off the pot. So I sat down, and I was working full-time in marketing at the time, and I spent 2 years writing a novel called Silver Sands, which at one point was like 90,000 words long, and then I edited it down to like 50,000 words.
Nice.
And that proved to me that I could do it. And it, as I say, it took 2 years, and then so I finished it in 2002, but it didn't see the light of day till 2010. But once I'd done that, I put it away, and I started writing short stories, and that was a great way to hone my voice. And I gradually built up from publication in free venues on the internet to paid publications such as Interzone. And I learned my craft through writing short stories and testing out ideas in 5,000 words instead of 80,000 words, and it gave me a chance to. I started off very much kind of not imitating, but kind of very much with a cyberpunk kind of William Gibson sort of vibe, and then gradually kind of expanded into the space opera second novel, which was The Recollection, that came out in 2011, the following year. So having written Silver Sands, it gave me the confidence, and I wrote The Recollection in like 3 months. And handed it into Solaris 3 months early, which I think surprised them. And because it was just like, suddenly I can do this. I got all these great ideas, and while Silver Sands was my first, it was kind of working out a lot of my influences on the page. But going back, it still holds up, and there are themes and images that recur later in my work, so it's definitely part of the whole, but it's a very early part. Whereas The Recollection is where I think everything came together, and I started writing with my voice. So I kind of count that as my official debut. Yeah.
Nice. You said about inspirations and homages. Who would you list as some of your main ones?
That's really difficult, because obviously everything I've ever read. I think some of the ones that spurred me on are, I always list Samuel Delaney's Nova in my sort of top 5 novels. It's just an astounding firework display of a novel. As a writer, reading it as a writer as well, you just see the fun he's having, and the way, there are points where a character starts a line of dialogue in one chapter and finishes it in another. And then you've got one character who's constantly talking about how difficult it is to write a novel and his own literary theories. And that he'll never end up writing the novel he's always blathering on about, but it gives Delaney a lot of fun, showing what the pompous ass this guy is. And then doing the opposite of everything he suggests. So yeah, that's a fantastic book. You mentioned Ian Banks earlier, and yeah, he was a big. I discovered Consider Phlebas not long after it came out, and it just completely blew me away because it showed me that you can think big and have fun, and that's just, you know, what more could you want to do? It's just get the biggest possible thing and crash it into the second biggest possible thing and just have a wild time doing it. So yeah, I think Ian and I we write very differently. Our styles are very different. Our references are very different, but he's definitely a big influence. And I think you can see the influence of Nova, especially in use of weapons. The childhood triangle and the conflict there is very similar to Nova. So I think there's definitely a common kind of triangle of influence going on there.
I'm so glad you said that, because imagine if I'd been like, oh yes, this guy's a new Ian Banks, and you're like, no, I've never read him. You're like,
yeah, I get wary. I mean, obviously I'm hugely flattered to be compared to him, but I get wary that when people say this is the new Ian Banks, people assume that I'm just kind of aping him rather than doing my own stuff. But I totally appreciate the compliment.
But it's not meant to be in any way derogatory. It's meant to, you know, if you read Ian Banks, then you need to read this guy too. Is basically how it should be taken.
Yeah, no, I don't appreciate that. Yeah, Ian Banks was the proto Gareth L. Powell.
Yes.
I love that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a superb book.
Yeah. So Gareth, can you remember what it was like when you found your voice? Because a lot of authors talk about this process of finding out who they are. And I think a lot of people fall into the same trap that you did at the start, in terms of, like you said, you weren't imitating people, but you were maybe overly influenced by other people's work before you got to the point where you're like, this is me now. So can you take us to that point where you realized this is me, and what it was like, and how it was different from your process before that?
I kind of realized it in retrospect. I think it's like dancing in some ways. The disco, when you start out, you're kind of copying what other people are doing, and you know, shuffling awkwardly about, and at some point everything clicks and you just forget what you're doing and you're just enjoying the music, and you've got your own style going. It's like that with writing. You start off writing like the people you admire and being very self-conscious about it, but at some point you get caught up in the story and you stop being self-conscious and you're just writing, and that's when your voice comes out. And with the recollection, I was like halfway through it and I realized that I'm just writing this, and I'm just writing this as me, and I'd stopped trying to put on a voice or put on you know, any airs or graces, and it was just coming out as me, and that voice has kind of carried me through ever since.
I was going to let Matt ask a question then, because he looked like he had one brewing.
I mean, I've so many questions brewing. I just didn't want to interfere with the format, because I do a cyberpunk podcast, and we'll have to get you on there to chat early cyberpunk influences at some point. But what do we ask people there is kind of like, what are you most happy with? If you've written a line that just, apart from that 2-word chapter, which is probably just beyond reproach, is there something else that you read back and it makes you just smile, makes you think, yeah, I've got this. So I can write.
I guess when you write a book, you kind of, well, I do anyway. I can only talk on my own experience, but I kind of have the first draft in my head all the time. So even when I've gone back and made changes, I kind of remember the first draft when I think about the book. So I kind of think, oh, there's a weak bit, you know. But when I go back like months, years later and flick through the book, and I think, well, actually, this is pretty good. It's like, ooh. And I'll occasionally come across a line or a phrase or an image that I don't remember writing. But I think,
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That is good. That is good. I can do this. So, it's not. I can't think of one offhand, but just occasionally when I'm going back through, I think, damn,
I completely concur. And I find that when you're editing, because I write longhand into hardback books and then transfer to laptop, and it's that jump point where some things you read stuff and you're thinking, well, that's never going to work, but some things you read and you think, yes, this is great, and that's when you get energized to do it. So I completely understand that thinking there.
There was I wrote a novella which came out from Tor.com and called Ragged Alice.
Different genre.
Sorry,
different genre.
Yes, different genre. It's a supernatural police procedural, but I very much I gave myself permission, because in the sci-fi I tend to be fairly stripped down language, fairly transparent language, because the plots are very fast moving and the concepts are very complicated, so I don't need to muddy the waters with very descriptive or poetic language. So I try to turn a nice phrase, but I try not to overdo it. Whereas with Ragged Alice, because it's set in Wales, land of bards and song, I gave myself permission to throw in a few extra sort of poetic twists and metaphors and additions and things. And I was very pleased with how that came out, because I was able to throw in some nice turns of phrases like bracken on the hillside like a sleeping army and so on, and really get in touch with that kind of inner kind of Welsh Dylan Thomas style writing, which was a lot of fun. And to this day, I still think Ragged Alice is one of my best and least known books. So,
will there be more non-sci-fi from you?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, I've written 10 sci-fi novels now back to back. So it's probably it may be time to kind of branch out slightly. Not too far though.
So Gareth, whilst we're on the writing aspect, we've had a few writers that have been on the show that have actually written books about the writing process. But you're probably one of maybe a handful of authors. So at what point did you think, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to write a book that's going to help other people in the position that I may have been in the past?
I never did. I kind of wrote it by accident. I mean, when I first started out back in 2000 and whatever, I had a blogger.com blog, and I would kind of write blog posts about what I was learning because I went into the publishing industry knowing nothing. So I was going in, and so I was writing about what I was learning. I was writing stuff that I'd found useful and popping it up on this blog. And then, eventually Blogger went away and I got my own website and started putting it on there. And then a few years ago, I was backing up some of those old posts, and I sort of put them all together into a Word document, and it came out like 60,000 words or something. And I thought, I tweeted, holy shit, I've just written a book about how to write. And Luna Press tweeted back and said, well, we'll publish it.
Nice.
So I worked with them, and we kind of hacked it around and put it together into a little sort of pocket-sized paperback. So I called it a field guide for aspiring authors, because it's like notes from the field. And that came out at some point. My kind of post-pandemic time is completely warped, but that came out, and after a year or so, Gillian Redfern at Galance got in touch and said, I really, really love this book. Can I publish it as a hardback if you write an extra 20,000-30,000 words and let me edit it? So they bought out the contract from Luna Press, and I wrote the extra 25,000 words, I think it was in the end, about new topics, and we reorganized the content into slightly better order and edited and then updated all the existing stuff, and then that came out last year in hardback from Galant's. Look at the size of that. Yeah, and it's called Field Guide because it's not one of those finger wagging guides where you must do this, you must do that. It's more like here's some stuff that's worked for me. This might work for you, or this might work for you. There's no one right way to do everything. These are some options, and it's more of an encouraging book, I think, than a lecturing book. So
yeah. I certainly concur on that. It reminds me a little bit of the Stephen King on writing that he did. His kind of book about on writing but most of his was on drugs apparently. So I'm not sure if that's much correlation there. But moving on from that, what about your correlation with Peter Hamilton when you did the? How did you find working with another already established massive sci-fi kind of legend?
Right, you're kind of breaking up and stuttering a lot, so I'm kind of pulling meaning out of what I can gather. Were you asking about the collaboration with Peter?
Like Chaser?
Yeah, yes, got you. Okay, yeah, that's something else that kind of came about. Way back when the BSFA invited me to go along to one of their meetings to interview Peter in front of an audience in London, which I did. It was a lot of fun. And then a year or so later, they had me along and said, "Who do you want to interview?" And I said, "Well, Peter." And to my surprise, I came and did it, which was great. And then we did. And then when he had a new book out, he invited me along to Foyles to interview him in front of an audience as well. So we kind of had this kind of vibe going where we had a good conversational vibe going. And we did a few events together. And at some point, I said, like half jokingly, "Oh, we should totally write a book together then." And utterly to my surprise, he said, "Yes, I'm up for that." So I was like, I had that kind of moment of like record scratch, like, what have I got myself into? Because I don't know if you've seen Peter's books, but they're all about this thick. And I thought, oh, holy shit. But then he suggested we do a novella, and I was like, oh my God. So yeah, I mean, that was brilliant. It was great to work with him. The way we worked was one. We blocked out the story in scenes, and we decided, right, because Peter's very good at world building. There were like chapters set on different worlds in different times, and he would do those. Because I'm much more character based. A lot of the story is based on this person alone on their starship, so I would do the character stuff and follow this character's journey. Although we kind of shaded into each other's bits here and there. And the way we did it would be one of us would write a chapter and then send it to the next person. And then they would read that and then write their chapter and send it back. And then they would read that. And so that, to keep continuity. For instance, I introduced the cat in one chapter that we hadn't discussed. And so he killed it off in the following chapter.
Yeah, I wondered about that sort of thing.
When I say killed it off, I want to stress to the viewers that the cat died of natural causes and old age. So there was no cat murder in the book. So it died like a long and happy life, but the effects of relativity meant that it died of old age before the next chapter could happen. But the great thing about that was to see him, to get the fresh, raw first draft from him and read it. And also to be able to read a Peter Hamilton story before anybody else. That was pretty cool. But I did have like a moment when we were sat in his study, blocking out the plot, thinking, "Oh my God, what am I doing here?" I'm going to get found out. So massive imposter syndrome, but it was a hell of a lot of fun, and the book sold really well. So it's been nominated for an award now. So cool, that's good.
Happy days. Yeah. So Gareth, we're going to move on to the second part of the show. I'm loving the whole writing process and obviously all the collaborations and everything that you're talking about. But we do have a next section, which is what's the story. So we'll play a little video and get into what your current release it is and what it's all about, the elevator pitch for that. And then I'm sure Matt will love to go into your back catalogue, so we'll do that as well. So play this little video and then we'll get into it. So, Gareth, this section is called What's the Story? So if you could give us your elevator pitch for your latest novel, that'd be great.
Okay. This is the latest novel, Descendant Machine, out from Titan Books. It's a standalone, although it's set in the same universe as my previous novels, Stars and Bones. This is Descendant Machine. So you don't need to have read Stars and Bones to read it. It is basically humanity now roams the stars in a fleet of vast arcs, and occasionally runs into trouble because the galaxy is weirder and more dangerous than we could have imagined. In this book, there's a character called Nicola Mafalda, who's a scout pilot who goes ahead of the fleet looking for trouble and usually finding it. And she stumbles across this giant conspiracy to open this ancient machine, which some factions think will bring untold riches and other factions think will bring untold destruction. No, it's not a Brexit metaphor. It's and she needs to seek out this ancient alien holy man to find out what the secret of this thing is. But first, she has to escape from the lethally radioactive remains of her wrecked scout ship.
Nice. I mean, that's a good sell, and if there was a little trailer for it, that would be a strong endorsement. I like the kind of the romanced element to it of her and her old flame. Is that saying too much about the plot? I don't know.
So I didn't catch some of that. You froze up for me.
Oh, she has a romance element where she has to deal with her flame that she still holds.
Yes, yeah. It's as I say, I like very character-driven stories, and it's always good to make things complicated for the characters by throwing in an X or twisting things around, or the human relationships and all their infinite diversity and complexity. You have to have, just like in real life, nothing is simple or cut or dried. We don't just get up in the morning. I think William Gibson said it about Neuromancer. He said in Neuromancer, none of the characters in that book had parents, and that kind of struck me because I thought this is very true. Because I try to give characters wider lives than just the adventure they're on. So they have. So if it was Star Wars, for instance, I try to give my characters, so Han Solo would occasionally think about his mum, or, Princess Leia would actually show some grief that her family and her entire planet has been destroyed. And she appears to forget about it 10 minutes later. But, and there's consoling Luke. Oh, did your weird beardy friend die? Oh, I'm so sorry. My entire planet got nuked about an hour ago, but whatever. Sorry, I'm getting on a rant. But yeah,
no, rant away.
Yeah. So I tried. They just fridged a whole planet. But so I try to make the embed the characters in lives that feel real and complex and messy, just like real lives are.
That's a skill in itself. Because you see some people can do it and others it becomes quite plastic and fake, and that's just, it takes you out of the plot that you're trying to tell. But I'm happy to say Descendant Machine doesn't do that. So
yeah, I mean, I try not to just dump it in. It's organic and hopefully relevant to the plot as well. So it's.
So, Gareth, what would your tip be for people to do that themselves? If somebody's watching this and going, do you know what? I feel, I'm going to use Matt's phrase here, that my characters are a bit plasticky. How do I get them out of that mode? Like, what would your tip be or a bit of advice be for that?
I don't plan my characters in advance. I know some people sort of fill out like a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet with eye color and all this before they start. I've got, unless I explicitly mention it, I have no idea what color eyes my characters have. But what I try to do is to, for every one of them, the secondary characters, just every character have one traumatic incident in their past. Even if it's never mentioned in the book, but there's something that's happened to them. It was obvious in Embers of War because the traumatic incident in that book was the same for everybody. It was this kind of huge war atrocity that had happened, and the way they were all dealing with that. But in other books, it's maybe something different, but something from their past that kind of broke them, and then they had to put themselves back together. And the way they put themselves back together informs the way they react to new developments in the plot and to other characters. So they will all react slightly differently because they've all been hurt in a different way. And that, I think, really opens up what a character is about and makes their reactions more believable and more three-dimensional if they have a reason for the way they react. And you know, I think we all have some terrible wound or crack or in us from the past, whether it's, you know, the loss of a parent, a humiliation, an injury, a physical injury. We've all experienced something that stayed with us and maybe has taught us to be cautious in certain circumstances, or to be untrusting in certain circumstances, or to be less cautious. I mean, it might have, but it's changed the way we think, and it in some ways formed our character. You say that people say things are character forming. Well, we've all got something in our past that literally formed our character. And if you can find that for the characters in the book, it really brings them to life, I think.
Yeah. And what I was most impressed with in the Embers of War trilogy is the fact that it's not just the human or alien species, but the ships themselves have fantastic characters. And I won't be embarrassed to say I kind of fell a little bit in love with Trouble Dog, your main warship. She's just a work of art. So I'm fascinated where you got the idea to instill some female DNA into a battleship and have a wolf pack element to it as well. It's just a beautiful combination of factors. Did it come fully formed, or was that a combination of steps towards that?
Well, I kind of wrote it in the universe. Humanity's never discovered true artificial intelligence. So they're in the AIs that fly the battleships and so on are built on a sort of substrate of human neurons that have been cloned from dead soldiers. And then on top of that, they've had some canine DNA woven into them to encourage pack loyalty and aggression. And then they have lots of different bolt-on bits of systems and so on to actually run the battleship. So while they're AI, they're also the actual spark at the heart of them is human, or human/canine. And I think Trouble Dog at one point says, "I'm a teenage girl with all the social graces of a missile," and that's very true, because I thought, well, if this is true and her brain has been kind of developed, she will be a teenager by the time this happens. So there will be some of that starting to leak through. And the trouble with these kind of human substrates is that eventually emotions do emerge. And the last thing you want in a battleship is a conscience or guilt. But after a while, they start to emerge, and it's this big inciting incident that causes Trouble Dog to develop her conscience, and that puts into play her entire character, which is she's programmed and trained as a killing machine but now she's wondering if that's not what she wants to do anymore. So she's torn. She's got these competing kind of id and ego kind of situation going on, where I want to kill everything, but maybe I shouldn't. And at the same time, she's like 14 years old and trying to figure out how she fits into the world. And I think we all totally relate to that feeling of like, well, I'm new here and everybody else seems to know what they're doing except for me. And so I really lent into that. I mean, my eldest daughter was 14 while I was writing it. So I really lent into that kind of what I saw her going through in this kind of like trying to, at that age, you're trying out different personalities and trying to figure out exactly where you fit in the pecking order and exactly what kind of person you are. And that's exactly what Trouble Dog's doing. And I think that being that is such a universal experience for all of us, I think that's why she's so popular. And in some ways, she is the most human character in the whole novel. So, so, I mean, she's fantastic. It's so much fun to write.
Gareth, I suppose one of my questions I've got is like, how do you know an idea can span over a trilogy? And then as a writer, how do you navigate writing 3 books as a minimum of a series? Because some people, like you said about attention and, you know, struggling to keep your attention in one field, I suppose. How do you bed down and get that sort of done?
Well, I've written 2 trilogies now, and I've done them both in different ways. The first one, the Akak Macaque trilogy, I wrote the first book as a standalone. And it sold very well. So Solara said, do you want to write another one? So I said, obviously said yes. I wrote another one. And then I said to them, well, look, we've written 2 and there are some loose ends. We really need to wrap this up and have a third book, just to wrap those two books together. So they said yes. So I did. And I kind of wrote the third book that tied it all up. And, you know, it became a trilogy, but it was never planned as one. With Embers of War, it was planned as one from the start, and we sold it to Titan Books as a trilogy. I'd written the first book, and I'd done kind of like 500-word outlines of what would happen in the second 2. And we sold it to them on that basis, so that once they brought the first book, I had to go away and write the other 2. And the way I planned it was what I call the Star Wars trilogy approach. Episode 1, you have a big adventure that introduces characters, get everything. The second book, you turn all that upside down. And then the third book, the characters putting it all back the right way up again. So it's kind of this kind of shape. Yeah. It's kind of the same shape as the Matrix or whatever. Neo finds his powers. We get the great cracking adventure. Second book, his powers aren't as good as we thought, and there are people with better powers out there than him, and blah blah blah. And then the third book, he's kind of coming back and sorting everything out again. So it's that kind of shape, and that's kind of how I think of trilogies now: is the Star Wars, Empire, Return of the Jedi. And that said, I mean, at the moment, the idea with Stars and Bones and Descendant Machine is very different in that sales of trilogies tend to tail off by the third book slightly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the first book is always sells best, and then the second book goes down a bit, and then the third book goes down a bit. Because, I mean, if you go to a bookshop and you see a book and you pick it up and think, this looks interesting. Oh, it's the third in a trilogy. I can't be bothered.
Right.
Or, it's difficult to have a big launch for the second book in the trilogy because people go, maybe I'll wait till the third one's out. So what we decided with Stars and Bones and Descendant Machine was to have a universe where different stories could be told, much like Ian Banks's Culture novel.
Yeah.
Where they're set against a common background, but you can pick them up in any order and read them. There's the marketing phrase on board at any point. So it's like, I think
the possibilities then for sequels and other adventures.
Yeah. If I think of other stories I can work in that universe, I can just return to it. and keep doing it. And then, but people can just, pick up the books in any order and enjoy them in any order. And then if they go on and find the other books, it will just broaden things out slightly. Yeah. That said, the book I'm working on at the moment is completely new and in a completely different universe. But I can always go back to the Continuance universe at any point. Yeah.
Love that. So we will move on shortly to the writing community chat show question time section. So if you're listening now and you've got any questions for Gareth, please send them in, and we will do our best to get them asked to Gareth. But Matt, I'm sure you've got more questions, so feel free to use the next few minutes to ask whatever you want to ask.
Well, I'm fascinated with the rumours of other formats picking up your novels and taking them into screen or wider other arcs. How do you feel about that? And what's the latest on adaptations of your books?
There is a TV adaptation of Embers War in the works. There is a script. There is a director, and there is a studio, all on board, and it was all ready to pitch to the big networks, such as like Netflix and Amazon and so on. But those pesky writers went on strike. Much as I support the strike, it was just like, everyone was, the pitch was ready to go. There's a trailer that's been made for the pitch, and everything, and it looks brilliant, and the script is fantastic. It very much captures the characters that I wrote in the book and the spirit of the book, but because it's such a different format, the writers had to put in different scenes and stuff that I can just explain with a line or a paragraph. They actually have to have a whole scene to explain, because you have to show and not tell. And actually reading a screen adaptation of your novel is such a lesson in show don't tell, because you think, I could have done a whole scene on that, just like they have. So it's a very, very interesting process. But as far as we're concerned, it's all ready to go. We just need a network to sign on the dotted line. So we need this strike to be resolved, and then we need a network to give it the green light, and we're good. Everything's in place, and it's got just as good a chance as anything else. The director is one of the directors from The Expanse.
Oh, no way. That's a great fit.
Yeah. So, he knows his, space battle.
Yeah.
And the concept they've got for the way it's going to look is just incredible. It's just going to look amazing. So,
anticipating, that's a great sizzle cell there for the whole concept. It would work so well.
Yes. And if Amazon is watching, then, big briefcase our way.
Yeah, we'll definitely get the candles out, and if we can help make it happen, we will try. But we'll move on to the writing community chat show questions. So again, if you've got questions, send them in. There's been some questions coming in already, but again, I'll just play this brief video and then we'll get on to some questions. So before we get on to the community questions, there's definitely a couple coming in. So thank you very much for sending those in. We'll ask a couple of staple ones. And the first staple question that we have is, if you could take any character from fiction and make that character your own, which character would you choose and why?
Ooh. There are so many. I mean, there are absolutely so many. I'd love to crack a Doctor Who. That would be
nice.
Yeah.
That would be good. I've got a couple of great ideas. I've got a great idea for a Star Trek series, which I'll probably never get to write, so I might just file the serial numbers off and write it as my own. And I had a really good idea for a Mandalorian novel as well, but again, probably never get to write it, so I might just file the serial numbers off and write it as my own. But yeah, so yeah, any of those, Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, I'd love to do something in that area.
Yeah, they're great answers, and I definitely think that can happen because we had the writer of the Mandalorian series on, not the TV series, but the books that were attached to that. He came on, and we've also had, and I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but we definitely had the Doctor Who writer that has written an episode of Doctor Who on this show before. So, Gareth, we'll manifest that together as a writing community to make sure that happens for you, because you definitely deserve it. But yeah, Matt, this is a testament to see if you can ask one of our next staple questions. Or one of your own.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I feel, yeah. No, I mean, I'm fascinated the fact that your partner and lady wife also write sci-fi. So how do you have a sort of off when you're not in a writing mode? How much conversation between you is about the fantastical and about plots and do you ever borrow stuff from each other? I guess intellectual property or ideas. Or like, no, that's mine. Or
we've come up with a few plots that we want to write together sometime.
Nice.
Often when one of us is writing something or just finished something, we'll kind of WhatsApp it to each other to read and have a look at. But we don't. We have very different writing styles.
That's true.
And very different writing processes. Diane works in a very different way than I do. So we don't kind of work that closely at the moment. We've got our own projects and we've got our own things going on. So but we very much support each other and very much there to bounce ideas off each other sometimes. And obviously to give a first pass on anything that we've written. And sometimes I'll just send her a paragraph and say, very pleased with this one, just because I'm really excited about it. So it's good. So we're not exactly writing in the same areas, but we're very much, there is a Venn diagram of our subjects that overlaps quite a lot.
And Gareth, I'm going to preface this with the fact that I'm not a stalker, because it's going to sound like I am, but I remember seeing your journey in terms of your interactions with your now wife, and then when you first met, and how things progressed, and it seemed to be very much present on Twitter and obviously a part of the writing community. Can you just, this is not a staple question, but I'm really fascinated how two people can meet online and then get together, and it was such a beautiful thing to witness from the outside looking in, you guys coming together and, obviously getting married as a result. Like, can you give us a little insight into sort of like what happened and how it happened? I mean, I know it sounds creepy, even the question is coming out of my mouth. Yeah, it's still creepy, but I like it. And I've not seen it happen before, but I love the fact that it can happen.
Well, it was kind of a slow burn thing. I mean, we were both writers, both on Twitter, so we were both moving in the same kind of circles. And I remember seeing, Diane posting about her space opera series that she was writing. And I think we did actually go back and try and trace back our first interaction on Twitter. And I think it was Christmas 2017. I just had a Santa hat on and said, "Happy Christmas, everybody." And she said, "Happy Christmas, Gareth." And that was our first interaction. But over the years, we just started chatting a bit more and being a bit more supportive to each other. And then, the end of 2019, personal circumstances changed for me, and I was going through a hard time. And then 2020 came, and obviously everyone went through a hard time, and Diane was going through a difficult time as a grieving process as well. And she says we trauma bonded, but we we were there for each other. And the friendship grew and became more than a friendship. And I think there was a little while where we were denying it to ourselves because there's a long distance between Bristol and Los Angeles, and it seemed unbridgeable. And we thought, this can't happen. But then, there was one point I was experimenting with a dating app, and it was a horrible experience. But I was trying to fill in my perfect partner, and it was like, all these answers I've just given are Diane, and and she felt the same. And then at the end of 2021, she just took a massive, what she calls a Hail Mary pass, just a massive leap of faith, and got on a plane and flew over to England, and the rest is history. Yeah,
fantastic.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that. So we do have quite a few questions coming in from the community. I'm going to ask one of them. And this was early doors, but I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't feel it was there was not a time for me to do it. But Agate says, what is, should pop up on the screen now. What is your top tip from that book? And when he refers to that book, he's talking about the book that you wrote on writing, the About Writing book. So there we go. Little snippet, segue.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they're all good.
Nice.
They're all dynamite. I mean, the main one I think is probably, for me, it's not to talk about what I'm writing too much.
Okay.
Other people's mileage varies, but some people need to discuss it all. I find that if I talk about it too much, if I sit down and tell people the story, then the storytelling instinct is kind of satisfied. And I've told the story and I've had a reaction, and now writing the book becomes very hard. Whereas if I keep a lot of it to myself, then I'm enjoying the creative process as I'm writing and thinking, I can't wait for people to read this. So that's just that's something that works for me. If I talk about it too much, then the magic goes on.
I love that. Gareth, do you mind if we go? Sorry, Matt. Do you mind if we go slightly over, because we got a few questions in the chat? Just a couple of minutes over, if that's okay.
No, I'm here. I'm here all night.
Brilliant. Go on, Matt. Carry on.
I was going to say, on that point, I can totally relate. And without wanting to give too much away, I've just had to short sub stories for the British Fantasy Society next anthologies. Improved there, but there's a spaceship maneuver in it, which is a very Gareth Powell maneuver, I would say, where basically being pursued on its last legs, asks a patriarch, the AI, what he should do, and does an audacious thing that no one in their right mind would do. And it was just, hopefully, if you ever get to read it, you'll go, oh, that's a Trouble Dog maneuver. And so that's a tribute there. Anyway, back to you, Chris, with the community questions.
No, I love that. And I'm excited to read that short story, Matt. Definitely. I love the little homage that you paid there. But the next question is, when did you know you wanted to be a writer? We've kind of covered that a little bit, but if you want to elaborate, you can. And then, do you have a proudest moment in your writing career so far? I do like that question. I think it's nice.
I think I've kind of covered the wanting to be a writer, because I can't remember a time when I didn't want to be a writer. The proudest moment is, oh Lord, there are so many. I mean, winning the VSFA award, the first one.
The first one.
Yeah, but that felt like the moment I went from trying to being established, being accepted. It felt like a validation. That I was, I'd just written this book about a talking monkey set in an alternate France, and it's my editor at Solaris. When I finished the recollection, he rang me up and said, "That's great. Have you got any other books you want to write?" And I said, "Oh yeah, okay, give me 10 minutes." And I went away and I squashed this kind of murder mystery idea I'd had, and this kind of talking monkey idea, and I squashed them together and sent it up to him, and he said, "That's the most batshit insane thing I've ever read. Can you get it finished in 6 months?" So, but some people just saw the monkey on the cover and just thought this is going to be a gimmicky comedy novel, and I think Whereas it's, to me at least, it's a very serious novel about growing up and realizing you're no longer indestructible, and finding the importance of family and the scars you accumulate. And it's got a kind of Philip K. Dick, William Gibson vibe to it. And the fact that it won that award was like, oh, thank God somebody has seen what I was actually trying to do with that book. So I think that opened me up to a wider audience, which was very, very helpful.
Brandon has a question which I think is fascinating, so I'm going to put it up. It says, do you think books are stories from other dimensions? There's been a lot of multiverse stuff being mentioned recently, so I think it's
if we live in a true multiverse, then it won't just be that the universe next door is dudes with goatees. It will be that every time an electron in the universe goes left instead of right, the timeline branches. Every instant, an infinite number of other universes are being spawned, all apparently completely identical, apart from way off in a galaxy 300 million light years away. A small pebble just fell off a cliff, but apart from that, everything's the same. So given that in an infinite multiverse, anything that could happen probably has happened. And so unless there are stories that utterly contradict the laws of nature, then a lot of what we think of as fiction could very well have happened in some way, in another, in an alternate way, in a smaller subset of infinite universes. The million typewriters with a million monkeys produce Shakespeare eventually. Infinite number of parallel universes will eventually produce events that look very much like novels.
Yeah. And Gareth, I'm going to bring this up not because it's a community question, but because Agate will love it if we talk about this, because he can add loads of tags and stuff to it. But there's a new Instagram version of Twitter, and there's loads of different things to promote yourself as an author at the moment. So what would your advice be to somebody who is new in the game and fresh in terms of promoting themselves as an author on social media?
Good question.
Deep sigh.
Yeah.
I would preface it by saying nobody really knows what we're doing, and we're all making this up as we go along. I would say up until last year, it was Twitter. You had to be on Twitter. Twitter was the be-all and end-all for the writing community. Now we have, to use Twitter as, to use Atlantis as a metaphor for Twitter, Atlantis is sinking, and we've all got in little boats and gone off in different directions. And some of us are building pyramids in the Andes, and some of us are building them in Egypt, and some of us are down in Easter Island building giant heads. And we're all scattered to the winds. So there's no way you can be on all of them. I've set up profiles on everything: Mastodon, Spoutable, Hive, even some ones I've forgotten about. But you literally just can't be on all of them. It would be a full-time job. And so I've chosen a few where I feel most comfortable. I'm still on Twitter, but I've stepped away from enjoying it, and it's now more a kind of just a professional presence there. My second biggest audience was always on Instagram, so I've lent into Instagram a lot, and I'm enjoying kind of the fact I can post a picture and longer captions there, and I've got quite a good engaged audience on Instagram. It's too early to tell for me for the new Instagram threads. It seems a bit confusing and a bit, it has the huge advantage that it already has a built-in user base with people who are on Instagram. So it will, I've been on there 48 hours and I've got over 1,000 followers. It's just been an explosion of craziness, because all your existing followers start following you on there, and Whereas with something like Blue Sky, where it's been invite only and a slow drip and expansion, it's Threads has massively overtaken. But I enjoy Blue Sky because it's got a calm environment, and there is a lot of the writing community there. I tried Mastodon, but every time I went on it, somebody would tell me I was doing it wrong, and it was I find it unnecessarily complicated, and I didn't like the discoverability on there felt like zero. So I would choose 4 or 5 platforms that you're comfortable with and put your energy into those. Don't try and do everything.
And Ag asked a different question. He said, do you think NASA invented thunderstorms to cover up the sound of space battles? I'm
not going to answer that because Men in Black will come and knock on my door.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, that is quite possible. And on the topic of people possibly knocking on your door if you answer certain questions, Brandon said, where's the best place to hide a body? I don't know if he's asking because he's got a situation going on, or if he's asking from a writing perspective in terms of where would you hide a body in space?
All right. Brandon,
asking for a friend. Right.
Yeah. Right, Brandon, put the gun down. The best place, probably the heart of the sun, or down a very deep hole, or maybe in the caldera of a volcano.
Nice.
Yeah, down a
great.
Or down
Gareth, one of the staple questions that we have in the writing community section is, it's quite a morbid one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You're on your deathbed and you're looking back at your writing career. What is success to you? What would you be happy with?
I think I'd have more pressing issues to worry about, but making a living, basically, making a living doing something I love. I've been kind of like full-time author since 2008, and that's working from home since 2000, since before it was cool, and that's kind of success for me, just being able to make a living doing what I like. And if I have a bestseller and become a millionaire, it's not going to change me particularly. I'll still be writing. I still, I'm not the kind of person who will buy Learjets or Maseratis or whatever. I'll just buy a slightly newer car and buy a house instead of renting. But apart from that, success is doing the work and being able to do the work.
Nice.
Oh, you seem to have muted yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I put the final question tonight, unless Matt has a few more that he wants to answer. Or
go ahead. No, it's fine.
But it's from Linda, and she says, what makes a fabulous villain and what makes a lacking main character? So it's a double-barreled question.
A fabulous villain is one who is right.
Ooh.
So they have looked at a situation, they've figured out an answer, and their answer is just as right as the protagonists. So, for instance, in Black Panther, Doommonger is right. Everything he says is right. I mean, they should open up their borders. They should help people around the world. They should use this amazing technology to help everybody else. And at the end, T'Challa acknowledges this, that he was right. He just went about it the wrong way. And you can say the same thing about Thanos in some ways. He's right that there's overpopulation and scarce resources. You need to get better balance. Unfortunately, his idea of balance is to murder half of everybody. So, so he's right. He's just going about it in the wrong way. And I think a villain you can almost sympathize with is very powerful character, because you understand why they're doing it. Whereas I think just someone twiddling their moustache and going, "Ha ha, I'm evil." you can't really, and they're kind of much more two-dimensional character. I mean, even Darth Vader and the you can kind of understand where he's coming from when he's like talking to Luke, going, "Join me, and we can rule the, we'll get rid of the Empire and the Emperor, and we can rule together as family." He is, he's got a thirst for power. But in the prequels, it's like he wants to stop people dying. He wants to stop, injustice, but he goes about it the wrong way. And it leads him to a very dark place. So, that's a very long answer to quite a short question. A lacking main character is one who is not active in choosing their fate. So a passive character who just goes from, and I've read a few books which have, I've seen a few TV series where characters are utterly passive and they just react. Things happen to them and they react. They never make a choice. And I think to have characters have to make a choice. They have to choose rightly or wrongly what to do and live with the consequences, grow as people because of those consequences. If your characters just wandering around reacting to things, then there's no growth and there's no narrative drive.
I love that. And Gareth, I am going to ask you one more question, unfortunately for you. But I feel like it's the perfect platform for asking this type of question. And we've asked so many authors this season about this question. But if you are on your deathbed and, you've passed over, but YouTube exists and you had to give advice to somebody that was taking over your body of work, what advice would you give to them and what would you want them to do in their writing? Bear in mind, they might watch this. It could be a reference that they come back to.
I would say that's a tricky. I mean, basically, on one hand, I won't care because I'll be dead. This
but you can impart some wisdom in terms of, like, last week we had an author. I got to tell me who it was because I can't remember. I've slept 7 days since then. But we had an author who she said, "I want you to do this," and she was very specific in terms of what her response was. So, it's out there. It's on the internet. People can look through this. It could be, hopefully for you, it's 60, 70, 80 years time. Somebody picks this up on the internet and goes, "Do you know what? I've got Gareth Powell's work. I'm going to sit down and write this next novel. I'm picking up a certain character and I want some advice from it. If I could get it, who is it?" And it was Lauren North. Thank you. I knew you were going to step up with that. Lauren North gave us some very specific advice as to what she would want. So this is your opportunity, what you would want, Gareth.
Okay. Given those six, I mean, I would say have fun. Nice. Enjoy it. Don't try and be funny. Just let the comedy arise naturally from the characters' interactions. Don't try and put them into funny situations. Because as an author, you should never tell jokes, but your characters can tell jokes and will say things that are funny. And I think most of my books are about people struggling with what it is to be human and struggling with understanding the essential unfairness of life. And I think there's a lot of politics hidden in my books. If you dig down and you go looking for it, you can probably find it, but it's not kind of on the surface. But dig down and try and find that, and try and find that these characters are very much thinking, well, we want to enjoy our lives, we want to have a good life, but there are always some fuckheads coming along trying to impose their stupid systems, their stupid will and everything on us, and we just want to look after each other and progress and have fun. So
I thought you were going to say just don't mess it up, don't tarnish it.
Yeah. No, I love it. Great. Matt, I nearly called you Agate then. Matt, have you got any other questions before we leave?
I think we should let him go, but it's like I could talk all night. But thank you so much, Gareth. It's you are an inspiration to a lot of authors who are slightly further down the journey from you, walking in your footsteps to some extent. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. I just mentioned if there are other authors, I have got a Substack where I do write a lot of writing advice on it. So so sign up for that. And I'm currently writing a series of posts called How I Write a Novel, which takes you from finding the initial idea right through to delivering the finished manuscript and then having it published and then launching it and everything and beyond. So sign up to that if you want to.
Brilliant. Yep. Gareth, that ties in really nicely with our final sort of question in terms of if people have watched this from all over the globe, which they do, where can they find your work? Where can they find information about you? And where can they find you online?
My most recent novels are published by Titan Books in the US and the UK. About Writing is published by Galance in hardback in the UK and US. Online, you can find links. I'm on Twitter, as I said, and on Instagram. And my handle on those is @Gareth L Powell. And there's links to a link tree on there that take you to my books and to websites and all my different social medias. Or there's my website, which is just www.garethlpowell.com, which has links to all the important stuff as well. So, I'm fairly easy to find. So.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Gareth, for coming on, and thank you for watching the show. Please like and share this around. And, if you've got sci-fi loving friends that would benefit from the advice that Gareth has given tonight, please like and share it around. But thank you very much, everyone, for watching the show. And please join us next week when we've got another brilliant author. But until then, we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll do that little awkward wave moment, and I'll play the video. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Gareth and Matt. And we'll wave, and I'll play the final video, and we'll leave. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, everybody.